A Cathay Pacific Airbus A330 is descending toward Hong Kong with more than 300 people on board. Then, suddenly, both engines begin failing. Inside the cockpit, the pilots realize the aircraft is no longer responding normally to throttle commands. One engine is stuck at near idle power, the other is trapped at high thrust. The aircraft is now racing toward one of the busiest airports in Asia, far too fast to land safely. This is the story of Cathay Pacific Flight 780. Cathay Pacific Flight 780 departs Surabaya, Indonesia for Hong Kong on a routine passenger flight. The aircraft is an Airbus A330 powered by two Rolls-Royce Trent 700 engines. On board are 309 passengers and 13 crew members. The weather is good and the departure appears completely normal. But during refueling before departure, something invisible enters the aircraft's fuel system, contamination that will slowly poison both engines during the flight. At first, nobody notices anything wrong. Shortly after takeoff, the pilots notice unusual engine pressure fluctuations. Warning messages begin appearing for the right engine's control system. The crew contacts maintenance control while continuing toward Hong Kong. At cruise altitude, the warnings grow worse. The right engine responds sluggishly to throttle movements, but all other engine indications still appear mostly normal. What the pilots don't know is that tiny particles inside the fuel are clogging critical fuel metering valves deep inside both engines, and the problem is getting worse with every minute. As the aircraft begins descending toward Hong Kong, the situation suddenly escalates. A loud pop echoes through the cockpit, followed by the smell of smoke and burning air. The right engine suffers a compressor stall and loses thrust. The crew immediately declares an emergency and prepares for a one-engine landing. But seconds later, the remaining engine also begins malfunctioning. Throttle inputs no longer work properly. One engine remains stuck near idle, the other becomes trapped, producing excessive thrust. The Airbus A330 is now partially uncontrollable, descending too fast and flying far above safe landing speed. The pilots declare Mayday. Approaching Hong Kong, the aircraft is still accelerating. The pilots deploy speed brakes and landing gear early in a desperate attempt to slow down, but the left engine remains jammed at high thrust. The aircraft races toward the runway at dangerously high speed. Inside the cockpit, warning alarms sound continuously. The captain manually flies a zigzag approach, trying to bleed off speed before touchdown. At one point, the aircraft is moving so fast that onboard systems trigger terrain and overspeed warnings simultaneously. There is almost no room for error. The Airbus finally touches down hard on runway 07 left in Hong Kong. One landing gear briefly lifts back into the air as the aircraft bounces violently onto the runway. Maximum braking is applied. The brakes begin overheating almost immediately. Smoke and small fires appear around the landing gear as the aircraft finally slows to a stop. But even after landing, one engine is still producing high thrust and refuses to return to idle. The crew shuts both engines down manually and orders an emergency evacuation. All 322 people on board survived. Investigators later discovered the cause began thousands of miles away during refueling in Indonesia. Saltwater contamination had damaged fuel system filters at the airport. Tiny particles from those filters entered the aircraft's fuel supply and clogged the engine's fuel metering valves. As a result, the engines could no longer respond correctly to pilot commands. The accident could easily have ended in a disaster, but the crew's ability to control the aircraft during an almost impossible high-speed approach saved hundreds of lives. Cathay Pacific Flight 780 remains one of aviation's most extraordinary emergency landings.
Learn more about aviation safety. Subscribe for more investigation videos.